seconds. Lights on.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
One path is we stay on Earth forever. The alternative is to become a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species.
If this generation builds the road to space, builds that infrastructure, we will get to see thousands of future entrepreneurs building a real space industry.
To the next generation of dreamers, if we can do this, just imagine what you can do.
Humans on Mars and other planets, spaceships ferrying hundreds of people on each flight, floating hotels and habitats orbiting the Earth, 10-minute flights from one side of the planet to the other. These are just a few of the visions that today's billionaire space explorers have described. Depictions that once drew ridicule or indifference because they seemed absurd are becoming a reality. Ideas from Isaac Asimov and Gerard K. O'Neill are shaping the future and present of spaceflight and exploration. Over the past 10 years, there has been a huge wave of new space activity. SpaceX, the company founded by Elon Musk, has conducted more than 130 launches, including some manned missions. Blue Origin, the company created by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, has had several successful test flights, including one with Bezos on board. Virgin Galactic has also had a successful test flight with its founder Richard Branson. SpaceX, the most prolific private spacefaring company, has driven a push toward cutting costs through reusable rockets that can land themselves. Since its inception, many of the 130 SpaceX launches were conducted with reused rockets. One rocket in particular has flown 10 times. The company has launched over 1,600 of its Starlink satellites into space and tested a prototype of its Starship rocket, which will eventually take passengers to Mars. Most notably, the Falcon 9 rockets have carried NASA astronauts, the first time astronauts have launched from American soil in nearly a decade, as well as a separate private non-professional crew. The prospect of space tourism has also gained steam in recent months with activity from Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin. In July 2021, Virgin Galactic carried a small crew of civilians, including company founder Richard Branson, 53 miles above the Earth on a rocket-powered plane. By a margin of only a few days, Branson edged out Jeff Bezos and his Blue Origin mission to win the first battle in the billionaire space race.
To all you kids down there, I was once a child with a dream, looking up to the stars. Now I'm an adult in a spaceship with lots of other wonderful adults looking down to our beautiful, beautiful Earth.
The mission from Bezos and Blue Origin traveled about 30 miles higher into space for a 10-minute flight. Bezos brought along his brother Mark, as well as an 82-year-old and an 18-year-old, the oldest and youngest people to ever go to space. Until the next Blue Origin mission, when Star Trek's Captain Kirk William Shatner became the oldest person to ever go to space at the age of 90 years old. All of this activity means that there has been a massive flow of capital into the private space industry. According to one report, space ventures have seen nearly $250 billion of investment in the last decade alone. But in addition to private companies, foreign powers are ramping up too. Russia was widely condemned when it fired a missile at one of its old satellites in November, which created a debris field in low Earth orbit. The catastrophic scenario is nearly identical to a scene from the 2013 film Gravity, starring Sandra Bullock and George Clooney. In that depiction, the Russians hit one of their own satellites with a missile, and the International Space Station was destroyed by the wreckage. Researchers have estimated that the real-world debris will threaten other satellites and spacecraft for years to come. Elon Musk said that his company's Starlink satellites have already had to adjust course to dodge the wreckage, which is traveling at 10 times the speed of a bullet. Months earlier, the Chinese government launched a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile that circled the Earth before zoning in on its target, with some lawmakers arguing that American technology was used to get the vehicle into low Earth orbit. The United States government has not counted itself out of the action either. NASA plans to launch its massive Space Launch System rocket soon, after several delays. The spacecraft stands an incredible 322 feet tall, 138 feet taller than the Space Shuttle. The US Space Force also recently granted SpaceX permission to launch military satellites. In the modern era, contests between world powers have often played out in the final frontier, outer space. And with these moves from the planet's most powerful governments, there are certainly echoes of the past Cold War contests between the Soviet Union and the United States. But how does the advent of private ventures change the game? And will they determine who will control space? While the United States has become by far the dominant force in space, there's actually a long history of international space laws and treaties that began over 100 years ago. As early as 1919, nations agreed that a country's airspace was merely the area directly above its territory. When the Soviet Union launched the Sputnik satellite in 1957, it violated this agreement. But President Dwight Eisenhower, knowing that the United States was interested in placing spy satellites above the Soviet Union, didn't raise any concerns. A decade later, around the same time the United States was setting its eyes on the moon, the United Nations agreed to an Outer Space Treaty. Signed in 1967, the agreement opens the moon and other celestial bodies to the benefit of all nations, and defines them as the province of all mankind. Likewise, the treaty says that celestial bodies can only be used for peaceful purposes, meaning that no weapons of mass destruction are allowed in outer space. Governments are also responsible for managing their national activities in space, whether carried out by official entities or private companies. And according to the agreement, each nation continues to have jurisdiction over all their objects and citizens in space. As of right now, 111 countries, including all of the spacefaring powers, have signed the agreement. But as we've already seen, lots of powers are pushing the limits of this treaty, such as Russia's anti-satellite missile and China's globe-circling warhead. But China's recent test isn't the only problem on the horizon. The main rival of the US is also seeking to stake a claim on the moon and is investing heavily in space weapons. China has landed 4 spacecraft on the moon, with one rover actively exploring the surface for about the last 2 years. In a June 2020 article, a US intelligence officer wrote that although current missions are peaceful, China views space as, quote, a military domain, and seeks to secure both economic and military advantages. She added that China has developed anti-satellite and electronic warfare capabilities that can be activated from Earth or space. In 2018, the Chinese military launched units that would train soldiers in directing anti-satellite missiles. Recognizing this threat, President Trump established the United States Space Force in February 2019 as a 6th branch of the American military. He noted the reality of America's adversaries advancing their space capabilities and actively developing ways to deny America's use of space in a crisis or conflict.
The essence of the American character is to explore new horizons and to tame new frontiers. But our destiny beyond the Earth is not only a matter of national identity, but a matter of national security, so important for our military.
In July 2021, the Defense Department's first head of space operations took a trip to Europe in an attempt to encourage allies like Belgium, Spain, and the Netherlands to develop their own space military units, along the lines of France, Britain, and Germany. He explicitly said China and Russia's recent actions are, quote, designed to deny our access to space. The Biden White House, however, hasn't seemed to take the current space race, or threat, very seriously. When Jen Psaki was asked whether Biden planned to keep the Space Force intact, she gave a sarcastic response and indicated she didn't even know who ran the organization.
Wow, Space Force. It's the plane of today. It is an interesting question. I am happy to check with our Space Force point of contact. I'm not sure who that is. I will find out and see if we have any update on that.
But while parts of the government might be asleep at the wheel, China is aiming for the moon, like the United States once did 6 decades ago. In December 2020, the Chang'e 5 landed on Earth after collecting 4.4 pounds of lunar rocks, continuing research started by the Soviet Union in the 1970s. And now, China is developing new launch vehicles and a new spacecraft that can send astronauts to the moon. They intend to set foot on the lunar surface in less than 10 years. Again echoing the Cold War era, Russia and China are teaming up to complete several joint missions, including a robotic voyage to an asteroid in 2024, and the creation of a research base on the lunar South Pole by 2030. Russia's own moon program, Luna, a callback to the Soviet program of the same name, was supposed to launch in 2021, but was pushed to May 2022 amid technical difficulties. Once again, this sets up China and the United States for more competition. Vice President Mike Pence said in 2019 that US astronauts would be launched by American rockets from American soil by the year 2024 through the Artemis mission, although that goal was more recently moved to 2025.
We will return American astronauts to the moon for the first time since 1972, not only to plant our flag and leave our footprint, but we will go there to establish a foundation for an eventual mission to Mars.
Pence also hinted that the lunar South Pole held great scientific, economic, and strategic value, and added that part of the mission would be putting the first woman and first person of color on the moon. Unlike former lunar endeavors, private firms will play a sizable role in the astronauts' mission. NASA gave SpaceX nearly $3 billion to try and create a human landing system for their final leg of the journey to the surface of the moon. The technology will include a fully reusable launch and landing system that can work alongside the Gateway outpost, which will orbit the moon and support long-term human returns to the lunar surface. But since its inception, SpaceX has always had its eyes on a far loftier target: Mars. Right now, Elon Musk and his company are testing the Starship rocket, which will be able to carry over 100 metric tons to space. SpaceX plans to one day launch Starship into low Earth orbit and refuel the vessel before it continues the long journey to the Red Planet. By 2050, Musk wants to build a city of glass domes before eventually terraforming Mars to support life, all a part of mankind's journey to becoming a multi-planet civilization. As competitors old and new, public and private, Eastern and Western vie for control of space, it is clear that mankind will continue to lift its gaze to the stars.